Hi guys, and welcome to the Stephen King Sematary Club. Gramma is a scary story. It's unsettling, it's creepy, it makes you wonder what would happen if you were in that kind of a situation, and it's very disturbing. So this short story kind of mirrors a little bit of Stephen King's life. He lived with his brother and his mother. Their father was out of the picture, and the mom's name is Ruth. Stephen King's mom's name is Ruth. So it just seems like George is a stand-in for Stephen, more so than other short stories or books. So what happened was Grandpa died, and Ruth took her kids to Maine to live with Grandma and take care of her. She is an invalid. They didn't think she'd live longer than a few months. It's going on 5 years, and she's a difficult woman. She is not very likable, but you don't really think there's anything other than... You don't think there's anything sinister until we get into the meat of the story. So Ruth is good at kind of talking Grandma down, because Grandma has spells that we don't really know what those are, but they're not good. We know that. And we find out more and more about Grandma. And she's not just an invalid. She's not helpless. She has been practicing some sort of dark arts. For a long time, she was trying to have babies and couldn't. They all died. And the doctors even told her, you have to stop. You know, this is not working. It's not good for you. And she found books. So witchcraft books, dark arts books. And all of a sudden, her babies were healthy, and she had a lot of them. So Grandma is definitely delving into things that, you know, other people don't appreciate. So she got kicked out of her church. She and Grandpa had to move away. And now that he's dead, the care falls on Ruth and her 2 boys. Ruth lost her husband in a drunk driving accident, and so she's the obvious choice. According to the other siblings, Ruth's brothers and sisters are like, well, we have families and lives, basically, so you get to take care of Grandma, which sucks. And Ruth is a little resentful, which I totally understand that. So these boys, Buddy and George, George is afraid of Grandma. He is uncomfortable with her. He doesn't like her. He's afraid of her. And one day, Buddy has broken his leg, and Ruth has to go to the hospital to tend to the situation. She leaves George alone with Grandma, which, the more we learn about Grandma and the more we find out in this story, that was a terrible idea. Terrible idea, and I can't believe she would have done that. I think there were other ways to have handled the situation. So, George is alone in the house with Grandma, and it's just a perfect description of, you know, what it's like to be alone as a kid. I don't know if kids are still left alone anymore, but you know, the kind of creepy feeling you get sometimes, and you start wondering about things, and you imagine things, you see things out of the corner of your eye, you're a little nervous once it starts getting dark, that kind of thing. And George goes through all that, and it's very descriptive. I really enjoy that because it really conveys that feeling of being a kid, home alone, a little freaked out. You know, you're not exactly sure, no cell phones, you know, unless your mom calls you on the landline, you're not just texting back and forth. And it reminds me of early days of when I was home alone. And George is also there with Grandma, who is in her hospital bed, and she's very large. She's not mobile, you know, so he is afraid of her, but she's also something he can just kind of ignore if he has to. George is starting to think about, you know, well, there was that time where Grandma had one of her spells, and then one of the neighbors down the road died. There are all these weird little things that I heard the aunts and uncles talking about how Ruth knows how to calm her down when she has one of her spells. Just all this stuff is, like, now that he's thinking about it, it's all coming to him, and he's like, maybe Grandma's a witch. So he looks in on her after he hears this death rattle noise coming from her bedroom, and she's dead. So there's all of this great description about him going in there, being afraid to go in there, not wanting to cover her face with the sheet, and, you know, putting her hand back on her bed. He gets a mirror and he holds up to her to see if she's breathing, that kind of thing. Just like the worst situation you can imagine as a kid home alone who's basically responsible for his grandmother, his sick grandmother. And, you know, he sits and he waits for his mom to come home and she's not coming and he doesn't know what to do. Phone is dead. So the phone is dead. Like I said, no cell phones, you know, this before that. And he hears Grandma reanimating in the back bedroom. And he doesn't know what to do. He probably should have run out of the house at that point. The phone somehow comes back to life and it's his Aunt Flo saying, you know, what's going on, George? I had a bad feeling. And he's panicking. He's telling her that Grandma has come back to life and is coming after him. And Aunt Flo says, you have to command her to lie down in the name of her father, her dark father. And George tries and it doesn't work. So Grandma body swaps herself with George. So now it's Grandma in George's body. And George is dead. So when Ruth comes home, it's Grandma in George's body. How terrifying is that? It just... very unsettling. This is not Freaky Friday. This is sinister. Before Ruth arrives, George kills Aunt Flo by giving her some sort of brain hemorrhage or embolism or something like that. So she drops dead. So she's the only other person who knows what went on that night. And she's now dead in another... it's convenient. And it says, George is thinking, quote, she wasn't going to talk to Aunt Flo, not tonight, because the telephone cord had been pulled out. Not tomorrow, because shortly before Mom had come home, George had spoken a short series of words, some of them bastardized Latin, some only pre-Druidic grunts, and over 2,000 miles away, Aunt Flo had dropped dead of a massive brain hemorrhage. It was amazing how those words came back, how everything came back. Page 494. George Grandma now has plans for Buddy, because Buddy is a terrible, shitty older brother who's always tormenting George and always picking on him and always embarrassing him and always just really being an ass. And so Grandma's very excited to exact revenge on Buddy. And I just... knowing how powerful Grandma is should have made Ruth very hesitant to leave her kid with... I mean, I don't know. At that point, I almost think she should have left Grandma alone. And I also fault the aunts and uncles. Everyone knew what Grandma was. The kids whispered about it and, you know, talked about these things, but they didn't do anything, and they didn't warn the children. The aunts and uncles didn't warn the children. So that is a major oversight. If you're embarrassed about family skeletons, that's one thing, but when those family skeletons are so deadly, that's an entirely different matter. I do fault all of the adults in this short story, and it's good and creepy. I love it.